couldn't agree with you more. Yeah,
and
absolutely right.
And then the medical marijuana, at first that was kind of poo-pooed, but all this latest studies and stuff coming out is just radical in the way that it's, changing the medical views on cannabis and what cannabis can do for people. And the same thing with this this is the third wave, I think, is this religious
Bring
information.
it up to Roger. Talk a little bit about Roger there, and Roger bringing these new kind of churches, and I really think that's the reason he's got no bail, is when he went to the mainland, as long as he was isolated in the Hawaiian Islands, like when I was, as far as working on the micro level of the islands, we educated a lot of people. A lot of people got educated. And
for sure. They certainly saw it was a threat. I think Roger, I love Roger, and I respect what he's doing, but I think that, he's a little overly optimistic sometimes. That, the idea that somehow, religious use of cannabis would say a get-out-of-jail-free card is ludicrous, At best, what we have is an argument. And if Canada, the United States...
versus subjective truth versus, in other words, our faith, our leap of faith, along with the Constitution, should be enough to protect us. But unfortunately, you could call them something because, we go in the courts with objective truth, and they think they're absolute. So it's a different kind of truth.
No, for sure.
As far as I'm concerned,
it's a worthy fight. It's a worthy fight, but it's a mistake to let people think that somehow this is a guaranteed. You don't have to worry about the illegality anymore, because that's just not the way the courts work. But in Canada, what I've done is I filed for an exemption for cannabis, spiritual use of cannabis, which was rejected. But then that opens it up to a federal court challenge based on all the charter issues. We have a charter of rights here. Charter issues of religious freedom, and then there's no criminal actions in there. And in the United States, what they have, there's a DEA form for request for a religious exemption from the Controlled Substances Act. And if somebody wanted to fight the law in the States, that would be the way to go about it, would be to fill out that application, send it in, and then when it's rejected by the DEA, pursuing a case through the courts where there's no criminal charges to deal with. Roger's case, unfortunately, is all tied up with these criminal charges over selling marijuana, and all the issues and evidence is what's going to be the focus of the case. It's going to be hard to get past that and get down to the constitutional issues of freedom of religion. I hope Roger can do it, but I kind of doubt it, to tell you the truth. There's just, so much other complicated issues in there.
Given the history.
And Roger was actually the one that suggested to me about I didn't know about that DEA form. Roger actually told me about it from jail and told me he wishes that is what he had done initially instead of pursuing the path that he did. But, Roger has done a tremendous amount of unifying of people and bringing them, empowering them with knowledge about the religious history of cannabis, about the holy anointing oil. Roger's a much more of a hands-on guy than me. I personally, I'm a member of the Church of the Universe, which is a Canadian church which recognizes cannabis as a tree of life, which has been around since 1969. But I don't hold an assembly of church members. I don't, preach to a group or have a church. I'm not supplying sacraments to anybody.
I'm sorry, Chris, but you've just done that. This is my church, and it is held in a lot of people's homes here. And
that's what I believe as well. You know what I mean? Like my books and when I do shows like this or I give a lecture, that's how I pursue my religious path. Gandhi said politics are my religion, and pretty much activism is my religion. For me, it's all about making way of the tree of life. It's not necessarily about me preaching to a small group of people and having a religious assembly that way. It's more about the spread of the knowledge of cannabis, and it's been I should add, it's been a great pleasure for me to do all this and be a part of the movement in this way and be able to bring this to the table.
So that Gnosticism is the knowledge that, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the Gnostics, it's interesting because we didn't really know much about Gnosticism except for what the Church Fathers wrote about them when they were suppressing them and all the bad things that they were doing. But in about 1945, I think it was, there was a cache of Gnostic documents found in the Nag Hammadi region of Egypt in a cave. And at first, they didn't even realize what these things were. Some goat herders found it, and then they started using it for fuel to start fires. And then they realized that they were these ancient documents, and they started selling them. And they ended up going all over the world. And then once museums and scholars began to realize just what these things were, they had to go track all these documents down all over the world and chase them down and bring them together. And I believe in many ways, because Gnosticism is so different than Christianity that came down to us today, that it is, in a way, it is the resurrection of Jesus. Like, okay, in 350 AD, Constantine, an emperor of Rome, he held the Council of Nicaea, and this is where the modern New Testament comes from. They took all the existing Christian documents that they could find, and they got rid of a bunch, and then they kept a bunch, and then they put together the New Testament. And these Gnostic documents are material that was going to be destroyed by the Catholic Church. And in fact, the guy who hid them actually has a text in the Gnostic documents themselves, and he refers to how after inhaling the incense of life, he knew that he had to hide these documents so that they would come forth at the end of the age and save those people that were, you know, the good people out there against the oppression of this other force. And it actually says in the Gnostic documents, and the tree of life, as God willed it to appear, to the north of paradise at the consummation of the age. And when I read that, I can't tell you what a chill I had. You know, it was just, I knew that's what they were talking about, was what this movement is and what this is. And this is the big threat to the Catholic Church, you know.
It gives you a direct, and this is the way I've always felt. I've been smoking for 40 years, and it gives me a direct contact with deity, with God, whatever you want to call it. And you know, why I've had preachers ask me, why don't you come to our church? Why don't you come to the church? Or why would does God talk to you and tell you what to say? Well, me too, bud.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You know, I think that's the big thing. It's experiential religion versus a religion of a book. You know, it's like the peyote used to say. You know, white man, he goes into a church and talks about God. We go into the teepee and we take peyote and we talk to God. And, you know, that's more about what cannabis is about in many ways. Cannabis spirituality is about the direct experience of the individual. We don't need an intercessor. The church is all based on somehow they have a connection that we don't have, and we need them as an intercessor between God and us. But cannabis takes all that power away, and that's one of the big reasons why witchcraft and entheogenic religions have always been such a threat to the Catholic Church.
Now, in 39, what I've said is this: our number one cash crop above corn, above cotton, was stolen from us, taken from us, made illegal to have here. What happened? And by the way, this phrase from Ayn Rand keeps flowing through my mind as I listen to you speak. The government has no control over honest citizens, so they have to make criminals out of us. And that's what the war on drugs is about, the war on terror is about. It's a war on anybody that doesn't want to go along with this one world government, one world religion, expansion of whether it's a Catholic, Christian, Judaism, or Muslim. You know, the religions in today, in my eyes today, is almost as much of a threat as the banks. To our freedom, to our liberty, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I agree with that. You know, there's various things, you know, like, if you look back at Prohibition, you know, of course, there's the whole theory of Jack Harris about DuPont and William Randolph Hearst. That was a major contributor. Then there was the whole thing that was happening around the jazz clubs, and people were really afraid that blacks and whites were mixing together at these jazz clubs and smoking cannabis. And they saw cannabis as one of the reasons that this breakdown and these barriers had started to take place.